Right, so you're still watching S8 Today. Now, it's being reported that plane maker Boeing might need to further slow or temporarily halt its 737 MAX production, its best-selling jet that's been grounded since mid-March because of two fatal crashes that killed more than 300 people, I think 346 in the end. This had a major impact on the company's bottom line, and to take us through that and the ongoing troubles at Boeing, I'm now joined by Aviation Analyst and Head of Multimedia at Fray Intermedia, Desmond Latham. Desmond, thanks so much for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for inviting me, Peter.
It feels like just the other day we were talking about Boeing, but it has been a while and their troubles continue. This week releasing their results and they don't paint a good picture.
Well, I mean, they've slipped into the worst results of any quarter in their history, if you look at the numbers. If you look at the other numbers, I mean, they produced about 139 planes over the same period last year, the second quarter, and this year 92. So far fewer than half the number of planes produced in the same quarter. And if you look at the first quarter last numbers, it was 239 planes. So if you just look at those three numbers, you realize that they're in significant trouble. And if you look at the numbers overall with their losses, yes, they're in trouble.
All right, so can it all be blamed on the MAX 737?
Most of it at the moment, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, they make the Chinook helicopter. They also produce other Boeing aircraft, which we're aware of and know about. It's not their only aircraft they produce, but it is their main aircraft they're looking at to drive sales going forward, because the single body or the single aisle narrow body airframe, which is what is the modern equivalent of the workhorse in the world, is what they were targeting, and of course competing with Airbus and, by the way, a few dozen other producers.
All right, so this 737 MAX, what still needs to happen for it to come online again? It's been grounded for some time now, and it really is a weight around Boeing at the moment.
Well, they've had significant issues with their testing. I mean, there have been three major issues around the MCAS system, the Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System, it's called MCAS, which put the plane into a repeated dive and which caused these two accidents. And the final report is not out, but that is pretty much the summary that we've seen. So that has not been concluded, the testing on that. And once that is concluded, then what they have to do is retrain the pilots. Yeah. And there's a big argument about how long that will take. So it looks like the end of this year. Southwest Airlines yesterday announced they were closing some routes because of this. So it's having a knock-on effect.
All right, so we've seen the loss due to slowing down in production and sales, but there's this issue about compensations to airlines and could hurt the bottom line even further.
It has already.
Yeah.
They put aside $5.6 billion to pay other airlines.
Wow.
And you know, after the air show, they signed a 200 airframe deal with AIG, which basically is the company that runs British Airways and a host of other Aer Lingus and a bunch of other airlines. And in good faith, they signed this 200 deal with Boeing, but now they must be I feel they must be reconsidering because of this hesitation in dealing with the final safety regulation around the plane. And now this is where Dennis Muhlenberg made this famous statement, where yesterday he made this announcement that Boeing may not produce the 737.
Right, and this is their best-selling jet ever, is it?
Well, I think it's a political move from him, because he's trying to force the lobby groups inside Washington to force the FAA to certify the plane quicker than it should be.
All right, so I think, you know, widely most people have kind of come to some conclusion, but the authorities themselves, are we any closer to knowing what caused the crashes and what was at fault?
That's a difficult one to answer, because the formal report, I'm an aviation journalist and you don't want to speculate too much, but the pilots that have been talking on a number of zones that I follow and talking to us are saying that the MCAS system solution is not concluded. They have not fixed it properly, and they want at least a few thousand hours testing before they jump into that. And of course the 6 hours or 8 hours a day of testing, you multiply that and start figuring out how long that's going to take. So no, it's not a quick fix at the moment.
All right, so lawsuits. I'm hearing that families of victims are claiming that perhaps the FAA were negligent somehow in the way that this plane was certified.
This is the terrifying truth. You know, there's an acting head of the FAA. It's the world's most famous safety body. And the whole of world aviation has always looked up to the FAA. Air crash investigation, the famous program. We know how fastidious they are about these things. But because they've had an acting director, his name is Dan Elwell, since the beginning of last year, there's been a problem about some of the processes, I think. And it's become clear now that the risk management, FAA gave over the rights to test the MAX the 737-8 and 9 to Boeing to conclude. And that's the first time that's happened for decades. And so the questions now about the FAA's role and Boeing's testing process itself, engineers are beginning to ask questions.
All right, so going forward, they were pinning their hopes as well on the 777 wide body, but there's delays there as well.
Not just in the 777, I must say.
Yeah.
I mean, the 777, I think it's the S, is supposed to be tested in January. But now we've heard that's going to be set back by X number of months. So you're right. I mean, it's the 737 and it's the 777 now is bad news for Boeing. It looks like maybe the end of the year. And that's why Muhlenberg has been saying, well, look, we need to hasten the 737's return, or perhaps we should just shelve it. And the problem there politically for the American political system is that, and Carolina is one of the major producing areas of Boeing. It'll have a knock-on effect in jobs, and thousands, we're talking about thousands of jobs. So he knows that could turn into a political decision. But the pilots of these planes are the ones who are saying, no, we won't fly these until they're safe.
Meanwhile, Boeing shares had steadied a little bit, but this week has not been a great week, and the shares sliding a little bit on the stock exchange there.
Yeah, I mean, they slid 3% a couple of days ago. I'm looking today to see I'm going to have a look out and see what the shares do. I don't think they're going to recover very much. A lot of people taking the long-term position on Boeing. It's a 100-year-old manufacturer, and the perception is that they will deal with this crisis. But I'm having my doubts as an analyst and also as a pilot, watching how they've been dealing with this crisis. I've spoken to Boeing pilots who are not happy with being told now that they would get back into the 737, let alone the passengers. And you know, there were 2 that were in South Africa already. Kulula had 2, or Kami rather, and they were grounded. So now there's this hundreds of millions of rands aeroplane parked on the apron here. Will our passengers in South Africa climb aboard this plane? I'm not so sure.
And Airbus must be doing well as a result of this.
Well, they've announced almost record numbers themselves. Their sales are up. They've eclipsed Boeing sales, obviously, in the last quarter. I don't have them in the back of my mind immediately, but they have done very, very well. They are making more sales. They're jumping in. But I must also tell you that Boeing and Airbus, the duopoly is not forever. There are other producers.
And, you know, we must put this into context as well. There were 2 fatal crashes, but at some point, 8,600 flights a week of this thing, 737 were flying. So, by and large, it's been a successful plane.
This is the curious anomaly in this story. The 737 is a wonderful aeroplane. And something happened in the production of this particular model that caused the safety issue, and it needs to be solved. But of course, the airframe and the redesign and the avionics and everything else that goes into this airplane, once they fix it, we will be seeing it flying. I'm quite sure about that. However, the problem for them is the understanding that there's an issue here about the safety on this particular.
And I guess the biggest job is building trust.
That's right.
With not just the airlines, but with people sitting in those planes.
You know, I do a podcast at the moment called Plane Crash Diaries. And I'm going back in history and looking at how every crash has led to safety improvements. And in this one in particular, I'm interested to see what the ramifications are going to be for the industry as a large, because we've had virtually no accidents. In 2017, we had 0 accidents, major accidents. We picked up a couple last year, so we got used to safety in aviation. If you look at the 1980s, if you want to be afraid, have a look at aviation accidents in the 1980s. There was one a week, and a major one. So we take that for granted. So you're right. I mean, it's not doom and gloom in aviation. This particular plane is going through a troubled period.
All right, Desmond, we've run out of time, as we always do, but thanks so much indeed for coming in and sharing your insights with us. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
All right, so Kate, we're going to take a quick break.